August 18th, 1590. John White returned to Roanoke Island on his granddaughter's third birthday. He expected to hear a living settlement. Instead, he found silence. White was governor, returning to about 117 colonists left on this coast 3 years earlier. But he was also returning as family. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, had been left here. So had her husband, Ananias. Their child, Virginia Dare, would have turned 3 years old that day. No one came to meet him, no watchman called, no daughter appeared, no child ran through the grass. The houses were gone or had been carefully taken down. There were no bodies, no clear battlefield, no frozen scene of slaughter. It looked less like a sudden attack than a departure. Then White found the first mark, 3 letters cut into a tree. CRO later, on a post or palisade, he found the fuller word, Croatoan. For centuries, that word would be treated like a curse, a dark riddle, the final whisper of a vanished colony. But John White read it differently. He read it as a message left by people who still believed someone might come looking. The question no one has ever answered is why that message was never followed. The legend turns Roanoke into a ghost story. A colony disappears, one word is carved into a tree, and the mystery becomes supernatural. The evidence is more precise and more tragic. White did not find only one word on one tree. He reported CRO cut into a tree and Croatoan carved more fully into a post or palisade. Before White left in 1587, he and the colonists had made an agreement. If they moved, they would carve the place name. If they left under danger or force, they would add a cross. White searched for that cross. He did not find it. That missing cross does not prove safety. It does not prove survival. It does not prove that every settler reached Croatoan, but it means the famous clue was probably not meant to frighten anyone. It was meant to guide them. Croatoan was not a curse. It was the name of a native people and place known to the English, usually associated with modern Hatteras Island. Manteo, a key native figure in the Roanoke story, was connected to that world. So the real question is not what monster took the colony. The real question is, if the colonists left a destination, why did the people who found it never follow? Roanoke was one of England's first serious attempts to plant a foothold in North America. Spain already had a vast Atlantic empire. England wanted trade, land, prestige, intelligence, and leverage against Spanish shipping. But the coast England chose was not waiting for empire. The Outer Banks were dangerous, shifting sandbars, shallow sounds, fragile islands. The land was home to native political societies with leaders, alliances, memories, and strategies of their own. Roanoke already carried a difficult history. The 1585 colony under Ralph Lane depended on native food networks, then damaged those relationships through fear, pressure, and violence. When Sir Francis Drake appeared in 1586, Lane's colonists abandoned the site. The 1587 families were not stepping into an untouched paradise. They were walking into broken trust, abandoned plans, and a location already marked by danger. That context matters because White did not return in 1590 to a clean mystery. He returned to a place where the trap had been built before the families ever arrived. Here is the detail that changes the whole story. The 1587 colonists were never meant to stay on Roanoke Island. Their intended destination was farther north in the Chesapeake region. Roanoke was supposed to be temporary, check on the small English garrison left from the previous expedition, then continue to a better site. But when White's expedition reached Roanoke, the warning came first. The garrison had vanished. The newcomers found bones. Then the plan collapsed. The pilot and mariners did not carry the settlers onward to the Chesapeake. The exact reasons remain debated: fear, privateering interests, logistics, or crew tensions. The colonists were put ashore on Roanoke and left there. A settlement planned for one place was stranded in another. These were not careless pioneers who chose the wrong island. They were families dropped into a compromised location with limited supplies, strained relations nearby, and no guarantee that relief would arrive in time. They had crossed an ocean believing England could plant a future in America. Instead, they found themselves waiting in a place already marked by failure. But the island was only half the trap. The other half was across the ocean. John White was governor of the colony. He was also father to Eleanor Dare, father-in-law to Ananias Dare and grandfather to Virginia Dare. The settlement needed supplies. Someone had to return to England, secure support, and bring back ships and provisions. The colonists pressed White to go because he had authority and connections. White did not want to leave. But staying might doom everyone. Leaving might give them a chance. So he sailed away. That is the wound at the center of Roanoke. White left his own family because the colony's best hope seemed to depend on his absence. He expected to return quickly. But the Atlantic was not just distance. It was a system. Ships, investors, crews, weather, permissions, politics. And war did not wait. England's conflict with Spain escalated. The Spanish Armada crisis pulled ships, sailors, money, and attention into national defense. One small colony was trapped inside a larger struggle. White fought for a way back. The horizon swallowed him anyway. Months became years. At first, waiting is loyalty. Then it becomes risk. Then it becomes a question of survival. How long can a colony wait before waiting becomes death? The most unsettling part of Roanoke is not the carved word. It is the silence before it. From 1587 to 1590, the colonists lived through 3 years we can barely see. We have no diary from Eleanor Dare, no daily account, no explanation from the colonists themselves. That silence creates the illusion of instant disappearance. But the colony probably did not vanish in one dramatic moment. It changed under pressure. 3 years meant shrinking food stores, breaking tools, worn clothing, illness, fear, and growing children. Relations with nearby native communities mattered more with every passing week. A European settlement in this position could not survive by pretending the surrounding world did not exist. It needed land knowledge, food networks, negotiation, permission, alliance, or protection. The colonists had options, but none were easy. Stay and wait, move south toward Croatoan, move inland, split into smaller groups, seek alliance, or survive by becoming harder for English eyes to recognize. And if they moved, they knew what White had told them to do. Leave the name. If forced, add the cross. That agreement turns the carved word into the colony's final known act of communication, and the clue White was never allowed to pursue. When White finally reached Roanoke in August 1590, the search began with uncertainty. From a distance, the party saw smoke. Smoke could mean life. It could mean a signal. It could mean native activity. It could mean nothing at all. They came closer. They called out. They fired shots to announce themselves. They searched for the people White had imagined. The settlement gave him objects instead of people. The structures were no longer standing as expected. The fort area had changed. Some of White's buried possessions had been disturbed or spoiled. There were no bodies, no clear battlefield, no crowd, no answer. Then the evidence narrowed to 2 carvings, Croatoan. White examined them through the agreement he had made with the colonists. A destination name meant movement. A cross meant distress. There was no cross. For White, this was not the end of hope. It was a search route. Croatoan was known, reachable, and associated with people who might have helped the settlers. The next step was obvious. Sail south, find Croatoan, follow the clue. But weather, damaged equipment, lost anchors, exhausted sailors, and crew resistance ended the search before it could properly begin. White had found the address. Weather, sailors, and the Atlantic forced him away from the door. It is tempting to treat Roanoke like a crime scene, but that framing can mislead us from the start. A crime scene assumes a crime. Roanoke tells us people were gone. Those are not the same thing. The evidence White recorded is limited, but it has a pattern. The colony had been abandoned. The houses appeared removed or dismantled, suggesting time and planning. The carved words were deliberate. The missing cross mattered. The absence of bodies weakens a simple massacre at the site story. But none of this proves safety, survival, or arrival at Croatoan. Good evidence can still be incomplete. White's account is English, hopeful, and limited. We have no final testimony from the settlers and no full native written account. That is why the investigation has to stay disciplined. The evidence points away from supernatural vanishing. It points away from one frozen moment of destruction, but it does not point to one simple solution. The strongest reading is this: Roanoke was not a magical disappearance. It was a loss of contact, a colony that moved beyond the reach of those expecting to find it unchanged. The first serious theory follows the word White actually found. The colonists moved toward Croatoan. This is not the most dramatic explanation. That is why it deserves attention. Croatoan was a real people and place associated with the islands now called Hatteras. Manteo's connection made it plausible. The logic is clear. Roanoke was unstable, supplies were limited, and relief had not arrived. Croatoan offered a known name, a possible alliance, and perhaps a better chance than simply waiting. The clue supports this direction. White found Croatoan, he found no cross. He interpreted the sign hopefully. That does not make the theory proven. If the colonists went to Croatoan, survival would not have been simple or romantic. Some may have found protection. Some may have married into local communities. Some may have died. English identity may have faded into new languages and loyalties. That may be the irony of Roanoke. Some may have disappeared because they survived in a way England did not recognize. A second major theory points inland. This comes from practical survival thinking. White knew the colonists might relocate, and later researchers have examined areas around the Albemarle Sound and mainland, and inland movement could mean food, rivers, safer terrain, or different native alliances. Some map evidence and archaeological work have drawn attention to inland possibilities. Those clues matter, but remain leads, not verdicts. The inland theory matters not because it defeats Croatoan. It matters because the colony may not have had one fate. The strongest surviving message says Croatoan. That does not eliminate inland movement. It complicates it. Croatoan may have been the first move, not the final destination. A colony of roughly 117 people was not a single object. In crisis, communities divide. The better question may be, how many different fates did Roanoke have? And when the record breaks there, weaker theories rush into the gap. Other explanations survive because the record is incomplete. Starvation and disease were constant threats, but starvation alone does not explain the carved destination message. It works better as pressure that made movement necessary. Conflict with native communities is also possible. The English had damaged relationships nearby. Violence could have happened before, during, or after relocation. But a simple massacre story at Roanoke itself is weak. White found no distress cross, no bodies, no clear battlefield. Spanish attack is another theory. Spain had reasons to oppose English footholds in the Atlantic, but direct evidence that Spanish forces destroyed the 1587 Roanoke colony is weak. It gives the story a neat villain. Neat villains are not evidence. Then come the supernatural versions. Curses, demons, ghostly vanishings. They are powerful because they are easy. The real story is more sobering. No magic is required. No curse is required. A fragile colony, damaged diplomacy, hunger, distance, war, weather, and failed rescue are enough. That is frightening enough, because it means Roanoke was not swallowed by darkness. It may have been lost through ordinary decisions made under impossible pressure. So what happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? The honest answer is not, we solved it. The honest answer is, the myth is weaker than the evidence. The colony was found abandoned in 1590. White found CRO on a tree and Croatoan on a poster palisade. The settlement appeared dismantled. His buried goods had been disturbed. He found no bodies and no cross. The most responsible reading is that the colonists probably moved. Croatoan most likely pointed toward a known native people in place, not a supernatural horror. Relocation toward Croatoan or Hatteras remains strong, but the case is not closed. Some may have gone elsewhere. Some may have moved inland. Some may have died. Some may have joined native communities in ways English researchers did not know how to recognize. That is why Roanoke remains powerful, not because it is empty of evidence, because the evidence ends where the human story continues. For John White, the mystery was never abstract. It was Eleanor. It was Virginia. It was a child's birthday on an empty island. He came back and found not a corpse, not a battlefield, not a curse. He found a message, 2 marks in wood, a direction, a possible hope. Croatoan, not a curse, not a ghost story, an address. And the final tragedy of Roanoke is that John White may have understood what it meant. But weather, sailors, and the Atlantic never let him follow it.